It's a good time to do so is to talk about the portfolio. The portfolio to me is the heart and soul of the social action class. It's 40% of their grade, so it's a huge part of their grade, almost 50%. And it's where the integration happens. The portfolio has a lot of things going on. I need to know, are they grasping the course concepts? Do they understand that? Because if they don't do that, referring to the hero and educator Paulo Freire, it's just blah, blah, blah. There's no critical thinking going on. So just action. It's not the critical reflection piece. This student starts with power defined. That makes me happy when I see that they're using the text. They're giving a definition of power, which most people don't have a clear definition. So she's saying, this is what it means. I wanted to get at from the very beginning. I'm trying to undermine this idea that they can't make a difference, that change is not possible, and that the tools for which change are possible are not things that they can relate to. And one of them is power. You can hear the student says, I have negative feelings about power. I always thought about it in terms of oppression, which I think is actually mostly true with my students, predominantly 70% students of color, mostly working class students. They see power in terms of oppression, and she doesn't want to be power hungry. She says, I'm a non-confrontational person, and I wouldn't define myself as powerful. And then she goes on to the text again and says, but I'm mistaken by the words of King and by this other Marianne Williams quote that I can see power differently. You see, they're grappling with the text, relating it to themselves, and then importantly, connecting it to their campaign and to other campaigns. She connects it on the second page. Temblador, class of 11, Christopher Temblador spoke on the importance of leveraging collective power by building alliances. Now she's taking knowledge that other students have had, not Martin Luther King, which is nice on some level, important on some level, but here's another student educating her about how to use power and how to build power. They're taking knowledge, applying it to their campaign, and ultimately driving it towards how they can use this knowledge to get the target to say yes, because that's the ultimate goal, to get the target to say yes. So how can they use the knowledge to move forward their campaign with the ultimate goal of winning? This is also a chance by doing this to see, are they doing the work? I would say a third of the students by class 10 have not done anything. The portfolio becomes a check because they turn in a log too on, are they doing anything? I expect a third of the class not to do anything, even though I'm encouraging them because they're not used to being active, engaged people in a classroom. I just encourage them at this point and lay the expectations. We've been flyering all semester. She goes on to describe the flyering. She again uses another student to talk about the importance of having connections with other resource centers and how her campaign is doing that. She talks about her organizational wrap. Remember, I asked them to start after this class, after class 10 that we're going to talk about. I don't just say to them, do classroom presentation. I say, who's going to do them? What time are the classes? And show me that, because that shows specificity. Because otherwise they'll say, yeah, we're doing them, but they're not doing them. And I would say, I want to give you this one example of the complexity of thinking. She says, I'm reluctant to label them as opponents. She's talking about the president and the vice president, particularly President Papazian and the vice presidents that we've met with, who are powerful. She calls them powerful oppositionists to our demands. She doesn't call them opponents. She doesn't call them the enemy. She created that language herself. Powerful oppositionists. While they have rejected our demands, they've expressed their shared commitment to house every student in need. She says, I'm reluctant to call them opponents, as I do believe that ultimately we want the same thing, to house students. But I want to show you the complexity of their thinking, of her thinking, in comparison to, I think, if you're not trained, which a lot of students have that righteous anger, and that's totally fine, but without some reflection about our powerful opposition. It is helpful in the process of bringing about change because she's not posing them as an enemy. She's not saying these are enemies that have to be defeated and they're going to take them down at all costs, but they realize their shared humanity and that this is a complex situation. And it doesn't mean they're not going to stop pushing. She's going to keep pushing, but she recognizes them as people who are not there yet, but they're going to get there. That's a huge insight. I turn it in 3 times. It just works for my grading schedule. I know when it's coming, and it's like an exam. It usually takes me a week to do to read them all. I give them extensive feedback on what they're saying, of course, and giving them insight and examples for them. But they turn it in sets of 3. It's usually 1 through 3, 4 through 7. So it's 4 on the second time, and then 8 through 10. They turn them in at the first third of the class, the second third, and then the end. The first portfolio is not very good because they just haven't done this integration of academic and coursework. So I tell them, okay, the second one I get, if it's better than the first one, let's say you get a C on the first and an A on the second, I will combine the A and the C to get a B and I'll call that the first, and then you get an A on the second one, so you're at an A minus. And again, I'm encouraging them to do it rather than punish them because they haven't done this before, this integration. I want to move to talking about the walking tour. The walking tour happens on class 9 of the experience. So about a third of the way through the semester for us. And I wanted to just remind you of what we came out of before the walking tour, before this class. There was a process in the change theory where they took an action where they named their campaigns. So they did that action, which I consider an action of naming their campaign. They have talked about and have started to do their stakeholder interviews, as well as their student interviews. So they're taking that action to build on their campaign. That was in 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. And then in classes 7 and 8, the section on building power, I asked them to start building their recruitment tools, their organizational wrap, their sign-up sheet, their flyers, their social media, start putting them up around campus, start tabling, start managing their social action account, start doing their organizational wraps. I'm asking them to do a lot in this time period. So I realized there has to be a break where they're in class. You're not asking them to do more, because if you continue to do that, they'll burn out, they'll get overwhelmed. So the walking tour is a break to reflect and not a moment to ask them to do anymore. The walking tour, they love. They talk about it for the rest of their class. I'll see them years later, they'll talk about that walking tour. It serves as a really important part of connecting, particularly my campus, which is historically seen as a commuter campus. Even though we have 4,000 students living on campus, we have 36,000 students. And so we have 10,000 who live right around the campus, but it's still seen as a commuter campus. It solidifies them to the campus. They feel part of the campus after this. Class 10, they start their organizational wrap. I want them all to do that. And I want them to be able to do that in their classes or student organizations that they can go out and talk to. So we have one student do that. That's how that class 10 starts. And every class from now on will start with a student, just whoever's assigned will stand up and do their organizational wrap. And as you'll notice, I don't say what they do wrong, rather what was good about it and what could be improved. This is the first time many students even stood up in a college and campus or in a classroom and spoken. I make sure that as I'm turning back their portfolios, that they all have agreed to the same demand. Because what happens is they turn in the demands for the same group and they're different. And I'm like, okay, y'all in this campaign, you have different targets. So you got to have a clear target and you have to have the same demand. So we actually then go through a process again of helping them make sure that they're on the same page with their demands. I find that by having them have this assignment at the third of the way through, I can ensure that going forward, they're going to be on the same page together. We're going to finish with talking about the research, because this is the next phase, the reflection piece, because they're going to be continue all those actions they're still doing, right? Organizational wraps, they're still doing the tabling, they're doing the flyering. So they're out doing this. So during that time of the action out in the community, there's some time to reflect. As I give this assignment in classroom 10, I say it's going to be turned in 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So they've got time to do it. I say there's going to be 3 research projects done. And if there are 3 of you in the group, because sometimes I have a group of 3, then each one is going to choose one of them. So one of you is going to choose the power map. One of you is going to choose the historical overview. And one of you is going to choose the target analysis. And if it's a larger group, sometimes I have groups of 15. I say, when you do it, you can work together, but use your own words in your response to me. Here's the analysis. And they're all similar in that I always start off with whichever research we're doing is, what have you learned from the previous campaigns, the reader and the book, about the process of historical analysis, about this idea of history. How is history important to a campaign? In many of what the students have said is the history research part provided them the key insights for them to win their campaign. For the minimum wage, for example, when they started to do the analysis around the background of a minimum wage campaign, they realized they couldn't do a countywide minimum wage. It had to be in the city. So it gave them that information, which clarified for them where they were going to actually target their campaign to. There's this direct relationship. I get them to talk about the other campaigns first. Then I say a 3 to 5 page historical overview of the history of your issue. And you can choose different time frame. I say 50 to 100 years, but I wanted to at least to go back into the 60s and the 70s. It could be earlier than that. What happened with your issue? If it's poverty, if it's housing, what have been campaigns? What have been the solutions put forward? What have been the issues? And who have been the actors and the organizations involved, both maybe nationally as well as locally? And then the key part, how is this information going to help you move your target to agree to the demand? How is the information going to help you? That's what separates this class from any other kind of experience they have. This idea of how is it going to help you agree to move your campaign forward? That is brand new, and it's dynamic, and it's what motivates the students to actually do the research. Because otherwise they're just doing it for you rather than doing it for themselves to move the campaign. Each group creates a 1-page PowerPoint that summarizes their information, that they can show the information to, let's say, new student recruits or student organizations. I do the same thing for power mapping. What have you learned from the previous campaigns about power maps? How much power does your group possess? Then they have to look at themselves. How much do we really possess? We've got 3 people or we got 15 people. How much power do we have? Who's your opponent's going to be? How much power do they have? Do you need more power? And if you do, how are you going to get it? I say 5 citations because I wanted to do research and create the 1-page PowerPoint. Here's an example of a power map. This is a student group, Student Homeless Alliance. How many people would know the mayor, the city council members, and so forth? The people that are powerful in the community on the left. Here are people who are powerful but opposed on the right. President Papazian, Vice President Patrick Day. Here are people that they put on theirs that are allies. Matt King at Sacred Heart, Grace Baptist Church, Cesar Chavez Community Action Center. So now they have a 3 to 5 page document behind that, but that becomes something they can use in their campaigns as they're talking to new recruits, to student organizations, that is helpful for their campaign. And it shows that they've done the background research, the kind of knowledge that's doing democracy. Getting the political capital and the social capital to understand how her community works. My students can do this power map so they know who the power players are. And many times they know them in person because they've met them as part of this campaign.